The Stranded J Podcast.
We watched 2 episodes, the final 2 episodes of the season, episode 8, Isle of Joy, and episode 9, Straight to Hell. And we are going to give our thoughts on both of them. I have a lot to say. I don't know if I have them like fully organized in my brain.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, I kind of forgot because we watched them so sequentially. I
Right.
forgot where episode 8 ended.
Right. I remember, but like, yeah, it's going to be, I think these 2 episodes are going to kind of meld together because I have the same feelings about both of them to a degree. So, they kind of feel like one episode to me. Like, I think they were a good 2 episodes to watch in a row in that way, because I think they both kind of had the same kind of feel to them. And, I think we know why. So we're going to first do kind of our surface level thoughts on the episodes. We'll start with episode 8 and we'll go into episode 9 later. But we're going to give our first thoughts on episode 8, Isle of Joy, and then we'll kind of get into details. So, I usually ask you first what your thoughts are.
I know, but you just can't hold it in. I can tell.
Well, I don't know. It's hard because like I can hold it in, but also like I'm also like I'm really excited to talk about it, but I'm also like trying to like regather my thoughts on them because a lot happens in these 2 episodes. And going from, taking almost a week off, or basically a week off from the series, and so much happened, at the end of episode 7 that it's like I'm inundated with a lot of stuff that happened, and we know where we're going now, right? This is where the creators who kind of took over the show halfway through, if not longer, they are showing what they want as opposed to what they've had to kind of Frankenstein together to make this season work. And we've talked about that throughout the series, how, this originally started with with creators who had a vision. And Kevin Feige, the producer of Marvel and kind of the overhead honcho guy, kind of came in and said, I don't like this, brought in some new people. They reshot. It's basically, we've gone into that a million times on this show, but getting down to the nitty gritty of it, like these last 2 episodes, along with the first episode, were unabashedly the creators of that are at the helm now. And what we've been watching has been them peppering in what they want, but they've had to use footage from the original kind of shots that the older creators did. And you can see it in this show, especially in these last 2 episodes, because I still think there's a mix. I think at the beginning with their first episode, they were just at the behest of the old creators, and it was like shoehorning in things that they could not, I think, make work in a very creative way. I think that was probably the weakest episode of the entire series, was episode 1. And I think that they had to do that just to be able to get to here, to get to where they are now. And you can see when they were able to do these last 2 episodes, that their direction is much more in the way they want, and it's much easier for them, and that you can definitely see the feel of what they're looking for in the show. But I think there's still just a little bit of burden of what it took to get us here.
I agree with that.
So, but yeah, so let's talk about episode 8, Isle of Joy. So basically what's happened in the last, in the last episode of episode 7, Muse was killed by Heather. Sorry, I get all the names mixed up, and we got them mixed up in the show too. He was killed by Heather, and we've had, Matt back as Daredevil. We've seen these hints of Fisk back as Kingpin. And this is basically the episode where everything's kind of all come to fruition, and it just kind of ramps up from there. You have, Fisk is Fisk, Matt is Matt, and you're seeing, okay, they're back as the characters that we've known for, the 3 seasons prior and if not longer. And now we're seeing the repercussions. I told Tricia while we were watching this episode, episode 8, that like this is the Spider-Man 2 effect, or the Spider-Man effect, where the more he's Spider-Man, the more his personal life takes a hit. And the more he takes his personal life seriously, the more him as Spider-Man takes a hit. And no matter what he loses, like no matter what Peter Parker loses, because he never gets what he wants. He never can find that balance. And you can tell they're taking a lot from that idea of all superheroes and all vigilantes in these stories. And you see it in Matt, and you see it in Fisk too, where it's kind of what we've predicted. Fisk wants to be, more of a legitimate person and kind of find his power again, but maybe through more legal means. But he will always be Kingpin, and he will always do the things he does to get what he wants. Matt, he wants to work through the law. He wants to be a good person all the way through and do it in a way that Foggy would love and do it in a way that his friends would love and make everyone happy. But he will always be Daredevil. And when he comes back as Daredevil, you start to instantly see these splinters that are breaking off in his life. And this episode is what really emphasized that the most. And I told Tricia this too, and I didn't really realize it until we finished the episode. He does not suit up in this episode. And he just suited up again for the first time at the end of episode 6 and going into episode 7. He's in the suit a few times. And in this episode, he's not at all. And I was telling her the best Daredevil stories, and honestly, the best superhero stories, are where you don't have to rely on them being superheroes. Not that I don't like seeing them as superheroes, and not that I don't like seeing them in the costumes, but they definitely, you can tell that they're firing on all cylinders when you're that invested in a show or in a comic book issue, and they did not become the character that they're selling you for, right? And that's what they do in episode 8. We got this big gala, and we get a lot of reveals. It's a lot of unpredictability coming from someone who loves to predict things. And we'll get into that too later, where there's a lot of things I got right and there's a lot of things I got wrong. And I love that. I love that you can go into an episode and go, I don't know what's going to happen next. This is like, there's so many directions because of the corner they're pushing these characters into. So I liked that episode for that. And I instantly felt a quality increase with episode 8. Not saying that episode 6 and 7 weren't good, but like I can just tell it's like ramping in a way that I did predict, where I was like, I think it will get better as time goes on because they're going to find their footing. These creators are going to be able to have more of their hand into it. But I can just feel this is in these last 2 episodes, especially, but in episode 8 is where I was like, okay, we're finally meeting the level I'm expecting from a Daredevil show after watching the Netflix series. Do I think it's better than the Netflix show? That's debatable, but do I think it's finally hit where I can put that in the category where I'm like, yes, this is what we've been wanting since episode 1? Yes, I think that's where we're at.
I feel like 7 hit that for me.
See, and I've gradually got there, and I think it's been really close, but I think it took one more period at the end of that sentence.
What was the period?
I think episode 8 is the first episode to me where it felt like it had one distinct vision. And I think, as we started the series, it was a lot of like off and on, like, oh, this is old creators, new creators, old creators, new creators. It's Frankensteining, like I said. And then as we progressed, we started to go, oh, well, like I can tell 50% of this were the new guys and 50% of this were the old guys. Oh, I can tell, 60, 70, 80. Mm-hmm. And as we got to like episode 6 and 7, I was like, we're at like 80 to 90% what I think they're looking for in this show. Episode 8 is where I finally went, this is 100% what they want. And this is what we're going to get from here on out. And now I'm seeing that vision because it's just the cinematography. Even if I had problems with some parts of it, or if I didn't, it was one consistent feel. The characters were one consistent feel. It was the Matt that they want. It was the Fisk that they want, the Vanessa that they want. And it didn't waver like some of these other episodes have done to try to fit, all of these different, some stuff was shot in 2023. Some of this stuff was shot in 2024. Some of this shot was in 2022, like whatever it may be. I didn't feel that in this episode in particular. So I give it props for that, especially. Giving me a break. Tricia, what were your thoughts on episode 8?
Oh gosh, now I don't even remember. Well, my opinions of the characters changed really starkly in episode 8. I do have some nitpicks.
Sure.
I have to say, out of all of the episodes in season 1, because that was the last one, 8 and 9. 9 was the last one.
Sure.
And we watched them both tonight, so we're gonna go over both of them. But 7 was my favorite.
Really?
Yeah, I
Okay.
did not love the last episode.
I believe that. I saw it. No, I saw it in your I just saw it in your reaction a little bit.
Oh yeah.
For sure, yeah.
I liked 8 better than I liked 9, but I liked 7 better than I liked 8. And
That's close because I think I liked 8 better than 9, but I liked 8 also better than 7. But it's hard. I think I got to rewatch it through.
And you will.
Yeah, I think I got to rewatch it through because
Would you binge it the
I
second time through?
I would for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's what it would take to kind of fully give my definitive. Like you got to let this stuff marinate too. Like movies where like you see it and you see it one way when you first watch it, and then as you sit and process things, you start to see kind of the negatives. You start to see some of the positives. So as of right now, that's how I feel, but I'm sure it would change.
Okay, so let me tell you the setup. I know that 9 is supposed to end on kind of an all hope is lost moment.
Sure.
And like
We're halfway through the hero's journey, essentially.
exactly. But 8 kind of gave me the last season of Game of Thrones effect where I'm like, whoa, a lot happened in that episode and a lot of characters starkly changed. And I don't love that. Like, for example, I thought that Heather had some pretty reasonable reactions in episode 6 and 7 when she's trying to get more answers out of Matt and she's kind of worried. In 8, it's like she was a different person.
I agree with that.
That being said, I know you can always say like, well, the trauma of what she went through with Muse and you know, like her being almost dying, you know, obviously it's going to change your perspective a little bit, but she just became so dismissive of everything that Matt was saying, and I know that it was to get her to where she ended up at the end of episode 9. Specifically, like if we're talking about 8 and 9 together, the way that 9 ended, I'm not like, oh my God, I can't wait for season 2.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, I
That
am
sucks.
not. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, like season 1's over. I can wait. I mean, I'm still interested in it, but like, I'm like, that's fine.
I do get what you're saying though. I felt very similar where it came to like when we got into episode 8, we were moving fast, and you're right. It's like like the last season of Game of Thrones is a very good way of putting it, because maybe that's also why I'm saying I need to rewatch it, because maybe if you see the pacing, you know, the pacing is going to be rough no matter what, just with the circumstances of how this show was made. I don't think there's any way you're going to be able to watch it and go, oh, this just feels really smooth the whole way through. I think it's going to be choppy, but like, I think if you watch it all the way through and maybe going from like episode 7 into episode 8, maybe it won't feel as fast. I don't know, but it did feel like they hurried to finish the Muse stuff to get to this stuff, and it's disappointing in a certain way, because the Muse stuff, I feel like if they had had the power that they should have had from the start, but they were required to use these certain characters, I think that they could have found a way to integrate Muse into the last 2 episodes of the season. And instead, because of whoever's decision it was to have Muse into the show in the first place, he was a great choice, and I think it was one of the best parts of the season. It just felt like a different season, and honestly, I compared to season 2 of the Netflix Daredevil, where you have the whole arc with Daredevil and Punisher, and then they introduce Elektra. We've talked about this too, and they introduce Elektra and then into the Hand, and they got Stick back, and you start to get into like the ninja stuff. It feels like 2 separate seasons in one.
Right.
And this kind of felt like that, except for it wasn't a 50-50, like first half's Punisher, second half's Hand and Elektra. This felt like a lot of cooks in the kitchen building to something. And then I will give them credit that they didn't abandon much, but they just had to go, okay, now that ends. And then we move on.
Right.
And then, okay, that ends and we move on.
Or it's like, let's tie this up.
And that's what I've heard from a lot of people who saw it they got like a pre-screener of the entire season, as they said, like it feels like that because the original intention of the original writers was it was kind of an episodic thing where every episode was a different court case. And it kind of ended, and then the next episode was another court case, and then it ended, and then it kind of has little peppers of what's going to finish the season, but it wasn't supposed to be this long arc.
So let's talk about two things in episode 8 that I did not really understand.
Okay.
Because I feel like it was all leading to, we have to wrap this up. Which initially I know that they were going to put out those 18 episodes and that was going to be season 1.
Right.
So I don't know if they did that just for timing where they're like, just get the first 9 episodes out. So try to force it into a cliffhanger. And that's why it felt so rushed. Where like if with the original plan of the 18 episodes, they were going to space it out and it wouldn't have had such a kind of melodramatic ending to to episode 9.
It's weird because I don't know the intention of how writing is on streaming services, especially when you've had two different versions. You've had the Netflix style and the Disney Plus style, where it's like you have it all come out at once with Netflix, or you have it all come out once a week with Disney Plus. But what it really feels like to me is, with the original intention, was it feels like it was 18 episodes written kind of like a regular syndicated show on cable, where you have a mid-season finale.
Oh, sure.
And that's kind of what it felt like to me with this season, is it felt kind of like a mid-season finale of like Arrow or something, where you had a whole lot go on, and it almost is like a season finale, but it's more of a cliffhanger than the season finale would be. And then you're like, oh, I can't wait until I jump back into this in 2 months when they bring it back after the holidays. And they continue where they left off. That's what it feels like.
Right.
And I don't know why they would do it that way if they knew they were putting it on Disney Plus. It was probably going to be weekly then with 18 episodes, but that's what it felt like to me. And maybe it's because I've watched so much of like Arrow and Flash and Superman and Lois and
maybe, but I don't think those CW shows are anything to like compare.
Well, I mean, it's not just CW shows. I mean, a lot of TV shows, that's the way it works. They have, they have their first half of the season, and then they take a break over the holidays, and there's no new episodes. They do reruns because they're off for holiday, and they're usually shooting, and then they have a mid-season finale. Right. And it's way more of a cliffhanger than even the ending. The ending will usually have a cliffhanger of some sort, but it's not that big. Mm-hmm. And this feels like a mid-season finale. It feels like this is like only the first half of the story. And I kind of got that impression when everyone was kind of talking about it, but this for sure, like it was like there's so many unanswered questions. There's so many different directions they can take it.
So let's talk about Bullseye real fast.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand why he wanted to talk to Matt.
I think, yeah, and yet again, I don't want to definitively say that that's a plot hole, because maybe there's something I missed and maybe I wasn't paying attention, but like from the first episode from that episode watching it for the first time, I did have a hard time connecting those dots. Why did he want to talk to Matt
specifically? Well,
and the whole lead in from Bullseye wanted to talk to Matt, and why did Bullseye shoot at what was implied to be Fisk?
Right.
And then Matt stood in front. And I think this sounds like such a cheap answer to this question. In my head right now, my answer is I think there's still there's a mystery behind some of that. I think there's a little bit
it's to be determined in
kind of like the reveal episodes. That they did the flashback to a year before, where you find out Vanessa is who recruited Bullseye to take out Foggy. I think there's still some more story to be told there, where they're like, I think there's a reason as to why Bullseye is feeling the way he's feeling. Another thing I'm kind of wanting to make sure, and I sorry to the audience who's listening if they're all caught up on everything, but like we really need to rewatch season 3. I mean, we watched season 1 and 2, and we've watched Defenders, and then we've, right around that time you went on your trip, and then we jumped back into Born Again. But season 3, they start to name drop Nadine and all these characters from season 3, and Bullseye's from season 3. And I don't fully remember motivations of all that season. I remember like the overarching plot of it, but like I'm wondering if we watch season 3 and then we rewatch this, if some of that would come together better. But as it stands right now, I'm like, I don't know what Bullseye is trying to do, because he's still out there, which in my eyes, it felt a little disappointing to me because I was waiting for that fight with him and Bullseye.
Right.
Not to say it was going to end and that's the end of Bullseye's arc. I thought he would appear in the second season, but I thought there would be a little more to it. And it's really just him breaking out and then attempting to shoot at what we think is Fisk. And then there's still a lot of like mystique behind Fisk and Vanessa and how their relationship's going. We know Vanessa's doing stuff behind his back. Is it to destroy Fisk? Is it to not? Because she kills her dude that she hooked up with when Fisk was in jail or whatever.
Adam? No.
I want to say Adam too, but I don't know.
Oh, maybe it's Adam.
Maybe it is Adam.
It definitely starts with an A.
Yeah. And so I kind of got
Adam.
Because we've been doing that joke. So that's kind of why I was thinking Adam. But yeah, like there's still, I just feel like there's some things that aren't tied up on purpose. But I'm getting mixed up where I'm like, is it stuff that's not tied up on purpose because we're going to find out in the second season, AKA the second half of the first season, or is it stuff that is a plot hole? And I think we'll fully be able to say that once that's done. But I agree with you where I'm like, Bullseye's motivation feels a little choppy. I feel like Vanessa's motivation is a little choppy, even though we kind of know her overarching goal. I feel like I don't really know where they're going with like Agent Cole.
I feel like he's dead.
You said he died, and I don't know if that was the same guy. Now we're dipping into episode 9 territory, but
okay, yes. So I have one question for episode 8 left. So why do you think that Matt saved Fisk? I have my theory. That's not like that's so stupid. I have my theory on why he did it.
No, my first instinct, and I think I told you this, was he wants more information out of Fisk. I think Matt was still putting together the pieces, which we haven't kind of gone over yet, which is the whole Foggy thing. I think he was putting together the pieces because he still thinks in his head that Fisk is the one who hired Bullseye to kill Foggy, when we found out as the audience that it's actually Vanessa because she was the one in charge while Fisk was being recovered or whatever.
That's not right.
Why?
Because he confronted Vanessa about it right before Bullseye took the shot.
Oh, right. You're right.
I know. Yeah.
Because he gets all pissed at her. And
then when he wakes up in the hospital, he's not saying like, I need to get back there. I need to ask them more questions. He's saying, this is what happened. I need to look over Foggy's files.
Well, let me finish that question too, because because like I said, when I first thought it, that's what I thought it was going to be, or that's what I thought it was. And then as we moved on into the episode, this is obviously a kind of taking the same kind of thoughts from Batman and Joker, where Batman and Joker are kind of inseparable, and there's a reason they both are, like, they kind of want each other to continue to do what they do. Like, Joker doesn't want to know Batman's secret identity because what's the fun in that? He doesn't want Batman to die because then his story is over and he can't mess with Batman, and vice versa, where there's this kind of deep down, Batman likes the chase of Joker. He likes Joker causing chaos that he can fix. And I kind of got that vibe too, where I wonder if it's something with where it kind of continues that entire idea that, you know, Matt will always be Daredevil and Fisk will always be Kingpin, and they need each other to be who they are, and they awaken each other. Essentially, it's a Dark Knight Returns thing where the Joker in that story, he kind of is in a coma because Batman or Bruce retires for so many years, and so he kind of just shuts down and becomes like lethargic and doesn't really pay attention to anything. And then the moment Batman comes back is when the life fills back into the Joker and he starts to cause chaos again. I kind of feel like it's a similar idea to that, where it's like Matt didn't want Fisk to die, not just because he doesn't want people to die, but because he needs Fisk to be Daredevil. And Fisk needs Daredevil to be Fisk. And I kind of got that vibe too, but you're right. I'm still kind of not sure. What's your
Yeah,
what's
no,
your
I
thought?
liked that. My only thought was I was thinking in episode 9, Karen comes back and he has this long talk with her about how he didn't realize that he was so susceptible to the darkness within him, and that he thought he was immune to it, and he realizes that he's not, and it's driving him crazy. But when push comes to shove, even for his worst enemy, he's going to do what's right because that's just who he is at his core. That without even thinking about it, he took a bullet. And that may not be something that he realizes yet, because Frank Castle said to him, he's like, why on earth would you take a bullet for that man?
Right.
And he didn't really answer him.
Yeah.
And I don't think he knows why, but that would be my theory about it, especially because earlier in the episode when he was, quote, quote, like interrogating, or he was meeting with Bullseye, that's what Bullseye said. He had said like, oh, if you were a good man, like you would be representing me, right? Because that's what you do is good men fight for like even their worst enemies. And then instinctively he did that at the end of episode 8.
I think that's a great theory too. And I think honestly those both
could be, yeah.
Like I
we may never know. I feel like those are some of those things kind of like in books where you never the
that's
ambiguity.
the philosophy of the characters.
Exactly.
And it's funny because like you kind of convinced me on your theory.
I loved yours.
Yeah, and so I kind of get both because you're right. Like, and that what an epic way to be like the answer to your struggle, Matt, is you're a hero.
Right.
Like you're a good person. But like you're right because it's the same. I always take it back to Batman because I do think that Daredevil and Batman have a lot of similarities, and I think one reason is out of a lot of reasons, but one reason is because Frank Miller wrote both of them, and they take inspiration from him and his writing in both characters so much. In Batman, like he does what he does, and he doesn't really have an explanation for it because he has a no kill rule, and it doesn't matter. His rule could literally like contradict itself, but he has this one rule, and that one rule, regardless of what it leads to, he will do. And Matt just can't stand to see someone die regardless of. That's why you have people like characters like the Red Hood in Batman who are like, Jason Todd, Joker killed me, blew me up, I came back to life. And I understand, if you let these people survive, Two-Face, Clayface, Riddler, for all the shenanigans they've done, but him, he hit you at the biggest nerve. He killed a family, and he did something so heinous that like you couldn't make an exception for this one guy. And Batman's answer is like, no, I couldn't, because I just can't do that. And it makes Jason resent Batman in that way. And in Daredevil, I think it's the same thing. And you kind of get that with the dialogue with Punisher and Daredevil, or Matt and Frank, where, he's like, just do it, man. Like, look at all the shit that they've put you through. Look at all this stuff that they've put you through to, be this angry and to ruin your life completely. Spider-Man deals with it too. And it's like, just this one guy, just do it. Because
especially when it came out that he was the one that killed White Tiger.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, there you go. You have what you've been putting all of this effort into, and the easiest thing to do is just finally give it justice in your own way. And Matt can't do it. And it's what makes it such an interesting concept, because sometimes it would be the easy answer. Like it would solve everything and make his life better, make everyone's life better, but he won't do it. And so just because he won't kill, and it doesn't matter what circumstance leads him to having an easy solution by killing, he still doesn't kill, no matter how hard it is. And that's what makes him a hero. And so that's, I think, a really good point you made with him and Fisk, where it's like, I don't care what Fisk has done. He could have been the one that led to killing Foggy. His wife could have been the one that led to killing Foggy, my best friend. But I'm not going to sit here and just let him die when I have a way to stop it.
Right.
I'll take a bullet, because that's my purpose.
And then I think that the really cool part about this series and this entire season is that they have been so on point about showing the similarities between him and Fisk, and there are very stark contrasts in this the last 3 episodes. I would say definitely the last 2 that we just watched, but the last 3 where it's like he despises he being Matt, he despises this man, and
it puts him in a bad mood.
Yeah,
it makes
just
him
talking about
destroy everyone around him.
And he I mean, he's always assuming the worst no matter what. And I think it goes to show that Fisk in the very last episode, he has, I mean, maybe even hours later, he has just had Daredevil take a bullet for him in front of his face, like saved his life. And he goes, okay, go finish him off.
Yeah. Because
that's an opportunity. We have an opportunity to get rid of him right now. And it could work towards my goals. And he, you know, Matt, this entire time, he's going, oh my gosh, I'm fighting this darkness. I think I'm an awful person. The whole time, Fisk, during this entire season, he was going, I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to save the city. I care about the city. And then at the very end, he goes, but opportunities have presented themselves. And so like, I can't stop being who I am. I am Kingpin. And then the opposite is true for Matt, where it's like, sorry, Matt, even though like you have the darkness inside you, ultimately you're just a good person.
They're both like haunted in their own weird way. And Matt is haunted by the negatives in his life of I'm a bad person. Maybe I'm evil. And really he's a good person. And Fisk is haunted by, no, I'm truly a good person.
It reminds me of
But he's just
that.
a bad person. He just is, it is what it is. He just, that's why he's powerful.
It reminds me of that saying where people say, if you've ever asked yourself, am I a narcissist? Narcissists would never ask that.
Right.
And so that's what I think about Fisk. And I do believe that sometimes Fisk thinks he is a very good person that has just been a victim of circumstance. And then things like this happen and he chooses to ignore that part of himself.
And I think that's what makes the character so great is because sometimes Fisk is a good person. And I think he does have good intentions. Same with Matt in the opposite direction, where I do think Matt sometimes is a horrible person. I think he's a bad friend, a bad partner. I think he's a bad lover. I think he's a bad...
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
I guess you like toxicity. I don't know what it, but like he does, and he puts things first that are not important, but he makes them important, and it ruins everyone's life around him. He wrecks people's life. But what it comes down to is it's that message of what are you at your core? What is it that drives you every single day when you're not in control even? And if it leads you down certain paths, that's kind of your answer. And for Matt, it's a good answer of he is a good person. That's why he takes a bullet for someone like Fisk. And that's why he doesn't stop. For someone like Fisk, it's, he does have some good things, but at the end of the day, if something pisses him off, he's going to do what he needs to do. And he's going to rip the jaw off of a captain who disagrees with him.
That was wild.
They got close to the car door with that one for me. And that's so comic book. And I said that to Tricia through both these episodes. There's a lot of comic book. Bullseye getting beat up by Matt in the interrogation room, and then they inspect him and he breaks the rest of his tooth off and spits it at a cop to be able to kill him because he's so good at what he does. That is out of a comic book. That is literally a panel out of a comic book. And I saw that so many times in these last 2 episodes, and that gives me hope for next season with these new writers, because they are taking a lot from it. And I don't need like a 1-for-1 situation, but I love seeing some of these. My favorite thing, just kind of segueing into this part of it, my favorite thing I saw from especially episode 9 is just how nonchalant it is to have one hero work with another hero. And in this case, it's Daredevil and Punisher. And that is so like, I mean, you know, you've only read Chip Zdarsky's run, and that happens at least 2 times in that series with Punisher and with Spider-Man, where they just show up. Like it's not this like, you know, they may add a little bit of a touch of a reveal for the show, but like they just show up and it's just normal it's like a sitcom, how they just walk in and out of everyone's apartments and just it's expected that they're going to be there. And it was just so cool to just see like Punisher's there. He's going to help out Matt. Yeah, it's because, you know, Karen reached out to me and Red, you need help, and this is what's going on. And I agree. I'm with your cause, like whatever it may be. And it's just so fun to watch. Like and it's hard with like licensing and stuff and shows, but like it would just be so fun if they had no holds barred, like sky's the limit. Like there could be an episode like in Chip Zdarsky's run where it's like he talks to Tony Stark and Tony Stark makes him some armor or something and like helps him out in that way, or they get in a disagreement and they have to show up, or Thor's hammer crashes into Hell's Kitchen and, you know, something leads to this weird side story. Like that is like my favorite part of comic books is when you get that copacetic universe of, you know, you could have, you know, I've said it before where it's like, you know, while, you know, Fisk is ripping the jaw off of a guy and killing him in front of his thugs, you have a talking tree out in space playing a 1980s video game and like acting like a teenager, like listening to, you know, Rubber Band. Like it's just so like cool to be able to get so far into a universe that the sky's the limit. And these 2 episodes showed that the most for me, and I loved that because the one thing the Netflix show did have limitations on is their licensing, especially more so than the Disney Plus stuff. And so we got some crossovers and some characters introduced and stuff, but like we didn't get it like this. That's why it was so cool in Spider-Man No Way Home, where you had Peter, you know, dealing with his identity being revealed. Well, it makes perfect sense that Matt's going to represent him when he starts getting sued for things, or there's, you know, he has to have a defense, you know, things like that. And so Matt just shows up to help him out. Like, and they make it so nonchalant. Like it's a cool cameo, but like, it's also just like in that universe, of course you go to that person. You have a problem with like dark magic, some random things coming to attack you in your side of town that you take care of. Go to Doctor Strange. He'll help you out. Like he knows what to do. And so, that's a big compliment to these last, this episode 9 particularly. And I just love the Punisher for that too, but yeah.
Yeah. I liked that about episode 9 as well. I'm trying to think. Okay, so episode 9 started with Matt in the hospital. Heather being dismissive. Like,
yeah, let's go back to the Heather thing because I agree with you on that. That felt very
forced.
Well, it felt like the best way you put it was the Game of Thrones thing, where it's like the last season of Game of Thrones, where it's like you watch season 8 of Game of Thrones and you've spent all this time with these characters and so many hours with this like very slow burn and progression that is very natural and kind of just intentional. And then you can tell somewhere along the line, the writers went, we got to move this forward because we want to get to this next part, whether it's we want to end this or we want to get to this next part. And it felt like I didn't feel like it was out of character for her to do that. It just felt like we missed a few steps for her to get to that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you were saying when we were watching it, there's the trauma of her dealing with Muse. And so it makes sense she'd be a little punchier and she'd be a little more jaded and she'd be a little more scared. And, you know, with the whole situation with Matt. And then it would make sense that she'd be upset with Matt for being distant and for not being fully there for her, especially if she's gone through something like that. You would wish that that could have been fleshed out more in maybe 2 or 3 episodes where there's a few more scenes of dialogue where they kind of talk back to each other about how they're feeling about what happened. But instead you cut all that out and you get to the next episode to get to the next plot point to progress all the characters. That's how I felt, at least.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. So, and maybe it's just because I'm trying to put myself in her shoes, and there are things that, like, she's not me, I'm not her. So there are things that she could do that I would never do. But the thing in particular that bothers me is how dismissive she is of Matt's feelings. And it's like, that's someone that you love.
Well, and just the complete denial of him convincing her Fisk is a bad person.
And like, she's like, oh, that's the thing. You are a therapist. you would think that if someone is that emotional and that passionate about telling you, like, I have a history with this man, I can't tell you anything about it, but also just know that, like, he's a bad man, he's manipulative, he is using you in a political game, and she just dismisses all of that. Like, what a crappy therapist.
He's like very specific with
and then
what it is too.
She can pull the therapist card of, like, I can't tell you that if they're my patient or not. You know that that's, you know, privileged information. And then in the same breath go, you've been very distant with me and you're not giving me any answers. And it's like, girl.
Right. And I think that goes back to what I'm saying about, I think there's a missed beat because the vibe you get, and it's been said in the comments, because like you do get this vibe from Heather that like she is gravitating towards Fisk, but you don't really know why, and it's not really that research. Like, you just kind of get this feeling, and it kind of leads to that, where like basically by the end you're convinced like, oh, she fully kind of believes in him, and she doesn't believe Matt, but you don't know why. And that's where you're missing that. You just needed that one extra therapy session with Vanessa and Fisk, or a moment in that session where she pulls Fisk aside and he talks to her for a scene about his philosophy, and it convinces her. Then you can kind of go with that. But it just felt like we missed that. Like, there was just that one moment in whatever episode it needed to be in to give her that extra nudge to that side. And so when you got it in this, it felt kind of like abrupt and out of nowhere. And it's like, why do you not trust Matt so much? Because I get it from someone who's been watching Matt for 4 seasons. He can screw you over being Daredevil, and he may not tell you that, obviously, but like there's a reason why like him and Foggy had so many issues. However, there wasn't anything that really earned her to feel that way in this. Right.
And like you said, I know that he was being a frustrating boyfriend.
Sure.
And she has every right to be upset with him in those ways, but I just didn't understand
It felt like they got to the point in the relationship where she like is convinced like there's nothing I can do to convince him, and he's like there's nothing I can do to convince her. But we never saw that moment where they realized that. Like, they were very happy having sexy shower time, and like,
well, who wouldn't be?
And like super happy to like, she dealt with Muse and it changed her. And so you can kind of understand why she's at that, but why would it all be about Matt?
Okay. Speaking of, I have to say, at the beginning of episode 9, I was so sure when Matt was in the gown and he had to like sneak around, I was so sure we were going to get a Charlie Cox butt shot. I was so...
Well, that was my favorite line from Punisher when he's like, you can do that with your ass hanging out? and Matt just kind of waves him off. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm all for. But then you were like, yes, do it with your ass hanging out.
You got this.
And then I told her, I was like, Charlie Cox is the kind of actor that like, I'm sure if you go through his repertoire of whatever he's done, he seems like the kind of guy that would go there
for the craft.
For the craft. So like, I'm sure if you do enough research, you'll see some kind of Charlie Cox butt shot if you really wanted it.
I don't need to seek it out. I'm saying that if it was presented to me, I wouldn't hate it.
Right.
In the right medium.
And one of the comments, can I just say Daredevil, Punisher is pure gold? Like, yeah, they're kind of the linchpin of this show at this point for me. Like, and that's what I mean when I say like, when you get a universe that's like rotating in the way it does, it feels so alive. Like, you can have any of those characters show up, and then it makes you like sit back and go, okay, we're in the same universe. Like, what if Daredevil in this show met Tony Stark, like Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark? How would they interact? How would him and Benedict Cumberbatch, Doctor Strange interact? Or, there's so many characters that you wish you could have them meet up with. In the comics, you have him meet up with Deadpool and they like work together. Like, imagine that story in the movies, with how rich and like feel those movies are. He meets up with Captain America all the time in the comic books. Imagine him meeting Chris Evans, Captain America, and like how their philosophies would differ, but how they'd still work together. Like, there's so many cool stories you can tell. And that's why him and John Bernthal together are so good, because it's two characters that weren't intended to meet necessarily in the comics. And they took that's why the Avengers works. Like, that's why that movie works, is none of those characters were originally intended to meet and work together. maybe to a degree, but like they were all these very specific, same with Justice League, all these characters and all these different versions. When you have them team up, it's like the childhood fantasy of like, oh, I've never thought, like, what if Superman met Batman? Like, what if Spider-Man met Iron Man? Like, because they were all written to be very pure, specific versions of what they wanted in their own kind of world, and you cross those universes, and it's just so cool.
Okay, 2 questions. Just as we are kind of wrapping this up a little bit. At least
Christopher Jackson, good to see you.
So in episode 8 and 9, they have Vanessa in red. And they did it on purpose, obviously, because it's a black and white event and she's the only one wearing blood red clothing. And then in the 9th episode, she also comes out in a different pure red dress, and Fisk changes into another pure white suit. What do you think that imagery is all about? It's definitely intentional. Why do you think they did it?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, maybe it's something that we'll get more of in the future, but what I could say now is the impression I got from them are everyone's at their most pure version of themselves. So, you know, this whole season has been about these characters trying to fight their past and fight who they once were. And we've talked about it since we talked about episode 1, where they're all going to kind of gravitate back to what they're intended to be. And I think Vanessa's kind of, that's a representation of, at least as of right now for me, it's a representation of Vanessa being the full stab you in the back kind of person that she can be now that she has taken over an empire at one point. And Fisk, every time he wears that white, that's like his iconic outfit in the comics, and they do it in season 3. Like that's the first time you see him in white. I think that's where they're like, he is embraced being Fisk. Like that is not, like that is Kingpin. Like that is not just Wilson Fisk, that is Kingpin. And I think that's another reason why they made a choice to make Matt's suit as Daredevil more crimson red. Because I think they're like, he is Daredevil. I mean, through and through Daredevil, and he will always be Daredevil. So I could be wrong, but like, that's the impression I get right now, is just like these big stark spotlights are like, this is them. This is just them with everything else ripped off. All of this stuff they're trying to be is gone. All these things they're trying to do to change people's opinions of them are gone. This is them going, I don't care. And that's where you see Fisk talking to so many people and like firing them and yelling at them in the office. You know, at the start of the series, he's in his office, like quiet, kind of trying to keep it together. And now he doesn't care. He will crush a dude's jaw in front of a bunch of people if he wants to. Like, he's not as worried about it because he has fully embraced Kingpin.
I want to get to Chris's comment in just a second, but for episode 9, that's one other problem I had with it, why I thought it was a little bit weaker than 8. I didn't understand. I know that he was blackmailing all of those rich folk, but then they just ended up in cages. And was it Anastasia? She was acting all weird at the party, and I didn't understand why
that I was a little, I don't know what the intention was.
I'm assuming
for
that like Fisk already got to her husband.
That's kind of what I was wondering too. It kind of, I think, was supposed to mirror, is Adam, I don't know if we ever figured out his name, the lover of Vanessa. I think it's just this idea that like that was the representation of the true Fisk or the true Kingpin. And like when he was dealing with these yuppies the first time, they were really like kind of walking all over him and like, we don't believe, like, we were here before you, we will be here after you. You have no control over us. You can't do anything for us. And like, I think it's kind of that final representation of like Fisk has even taken them over and he's put them in cages because that's just what he does. It's like, it's the representation of everyone in New York feels like they're in a cage because he owns everything. It's that same feeling he got in season 1 where it's just like, he owns everything. What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? Who are we supposed to give this information to? And that leads me into one other thing. And that is Foggy. And I think Foggy's still alive. I've said it since episode 1, but I think he's still alive because I think Foggy is going to be the downfall of Fisk, because whatever it is that they were talking about, that led to Matt realize that Foggy is the like he knew that he was going to win this case that was going to bring Fisk down, and Fisk was going to cover it up, and then you find out it's Vanessa. I think due to the fact that Vanessa and Fisk aren't communicating fully with what their intentions were, I think it's going to lead to Foggy being alive, coming back, and having whatever evidence it takes to bring Fisk down when he has so much power over the city right now. And it's going to be his downfall, is like his lack of communication with his wife.
And you thought that Bullseye... Initially, you thought that Vanessa hired Bullseye to kill Fisk. Was that fleeting?
Yeah, that was fleeting. I thought she hired, because then they revealed that she hired him to kill Foggy.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of they did a flashback thing instead, and that was a little off on my part.
And I thought that he just did that, and I think that this is correct still, but I thought that he just tried to kill him at that party because he tried to have him killed on the inside.
See, and that's kind of what I was wondering too, is like, it's like his revenge on Fisk due to him putting him in whatever you call it.
Yeah, I don't remember what the holding block was
but
that he got put into.
Put him in like the public. Yeah. And like that is probably what it was. I said Bullseye's kind of like the Joker in that sense, where he's kind of unpredictable. He does it for the thrill, and he's very psycho. And I don't think he's fully embraced the Bullseye thing yet. I think that's going to happen in season 2 as well. But sometimes he just does things because he wants to see the person's reaction. He wants to see them horrified, or he wants to see them break, or he wants to see them hurt.
It is weird to hear Fisk group all of the vigilantes and the villains together, where he just calls them all vigilantes.
Yeah, well, and then in the comments, Bullseye and Swordsman are going to fight with Daredevil along with Punisher, I think, and I think that's going to happen too. And I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I don't know if we've had. I know it sounds so weird. I don't know if we've had enough of that conflict between Matt and Bullseye yet. So maybe that'll happen where they'll team up and like. Because they're all vigilantes and they're all going to fight towards Fisk. But I hope what will happen is that like Bullseye will work with Matt and everybody else, and then he'll betray him by the end of it. And it leads to, Fisk is taken down, everything's kind of back to normal, and the last thing is him and Bullseye.
One other problem I had with how 9 ended, is when he put this task force together, the anti-vigilante task force, he made it sound like he had a team of about 10 people. And by the end of it, he had an army. I mean, it was like every single person in every borough of New York.
Yeah, he had hundreds, if not thousands. Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way that
did
all
it
of
move
them
on
were...
from just being cops to like just random dudes on the street now?
It didn't look... Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Like, I don't know. I agree, though. One thing I will say is you can never question a comic book nerd's theory on things. I'm not talking about me. Is the moment that they introduced this whole Punisher thing, and I mean, I did know this, but like the one thing when they first introduced Punisher, and then they also introduced like this task force with Punisher logos, the first thing comic book fans would say is, oh, Frank's gonna freaking hate that. Like, he's gonna hate that they're using what he does for an agenda, because his agenda doesn't, it's very personal and private. And that's exactly what happened. Like,
one thing, and I do still think it will be Frank that does it. We didn't get it this past episode, but I did say while we were watching it that the leader of this task force, like the main guy that's super cocky, that got his neck broken in
the
episode 2.
Dude that should have died in episode 2. Yeah,
he for sure got his neck broken, but we'll just ignore that.
And he came back with a couple cuts and bruises.
Yeah, ouch. But Frank will be the one to kill him, and it will be very satisfying.
I think that's the fun part about Frank working with like someone like Matt, is they'll always be able to find a way to write a character that you hate and you want to see die, and you know that Matt's not the person to do it, and they can bring in Frank to just do it. Like you're always like, oh, it's like in Indiana Jones, where it's like, oh, this dude's driving me crazy, I hope he dies. And Indiana Jones doesn't care. He'll wipe people away. They're Nazis or whatever. And so it's like they finally have their comeuppance, and you see them die in like the most like satisfying way, or in like something like Game of Thrones. But in this, you're like, gosh, but Matt doesn't kill. So it's like, he can get his revenge to a degree. He can smash him into a fridge and break his neck and he'll fully die. And taunt him. And then he'll come back somehow with bruises and cuts that'll always bother me. But you can have someone like Frank who like Matt will beat the crap out of him, or he'll get stuck and Frank will be like, stop wearing my shit and shoot him. And then it's over. Or like make it super, super satisfying. So yeah, I agree. I think that'll happen too. Comment, are they going to try to get the people of New York on their side? I wonder if Foggy will help with that. That's a good point too. I don't know if like, because I know that they've already confirmed Foggy will appear in season 2. And
do we know when season 2 starts?
Well, it's filming right now. So I would guess probably around the same time season 1 started. I would say a year from then, maybe. So it's going to be a little bit of time. But I've already seen some of those leaks on the set, and it's exciting, some of the stuff. I don't know. Like, there's so many different ways they can go with it. I think that I hope that they don't make it too definitive where they can't really, they're like, oh, and then season 2 ends and that's the end of Daredevil. I hope they kind of continue it because there's so many other directions they can go with that. But I don't know. We'll see. I think obviously the people of New York will get, I think there will be some way that they get the proof that like Fisk is corrupt and that they shouldn't have trusted him. So
who will be on Fisk's side? Well, Heather.
Well, that's the other person I would talk about is James Gandolfini's son.
Do we have to?
I just want to talk. I want to say one thing is I don't think he's the greatest actor. I do think he was kind of a nepotism baby due to James Gandolfini.
He was 100% a nepotism baby.
Yes, he's not the greatest actor, but one thing I got to give him credit for, and I think I got to give credit to the casting for too, is he is a great. I don't. His character could go in so many different ways, and I kind of have ideas that like it's going to be like this, like he's doing really well and he's going to fall because he's too loyal, or he could go in a direction where he eventually betrays Fisk, whatever it may be. But I love his casting in the sense that he is not the best actor, but he is the perfect, like, weaselly, like, guy you would never expect to take control of a situation that, like, just, like, fails upwards, essentially. And because of, out of just pure reliance and, like, dedication to a person. And so, like, now he just has this power with this really kind of, like, he's, like, purposefully annoying.
He reminds me of that guy in school that used to get bullied a lot, that gets like a little bit of power. Like he's a manager of a Wells Fargo branch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And like he's just like a total
he's the guy who slices the meat at Jimmy John's and he tells everybody when they need to come in, and like now he's in charge. And so he still has like the dorkiness, and like you could probably still give him the noogie, but like he like is very... He
winces when he drinks Monster energy drinks.
Right, but like since he has that power, he like kind of like has a little bit more of like a puffed out chest, and like I think that is being portrayed pretty well with him, and that's the only like compliment. Like I do think he is annoying, but I think it's kind of some of it's purposeful, and I like that a lot about that character. I
honestly could go out with, or I could go without all of his scenes, and I don't really love BB. I think that she's just a cheap imitation of what her uncle was.
Well, and we talked about that a little bit too, where I think that between BB and Buck, I think they are both. If in an alternate universe, the Netflix show never decided to kill off Ben Urich and Wesley, they would just be those guys. It would be Wesley. Wesley would be in season 4. He would be Buck, and he'd be doing the things Buck does as Wesley, and the same actor. And I think that Ben Urich would be the one who would go through and like be doing. It wouldn't be this like him and James Gandolfini's son kind of talk. I think it would just be Ben Urich as Ben Urich. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm like lining up this stupid like thing to make sure we can continue to stream.
There we go. Okay, but that does mean we've been live for an hour.
Yes. So we can start wrapping it up. Just a couple last minute things that I wanted to ask you before we sign off. And then if there's any questions, get them in. So out of the season, what was your favorite episode? I think you kind of said
7.
7 overall.
Definitely. I thought Muse is another one I'm really sad that died. It's like everybody that I want to die doesn't, and there's really only been one person. But anyone that I want to die doesn't die, and everyone that I'm like, man, they're a good character, dies. Like, they killed every single one of them. The priest from the original, Wesley, they killed. Ben Urich, they killed. All of those guys, not only were they phenomenal actors, they were huge in the comic books.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why
I agree.
would you do that? And I feel like they just did it to be like, no one's safe. Whoa.
Well, I think they did that, but I also think that they may have had a direction they could have gone with in the Netflix version, and then it got canceled, and they had a bunch of different hubbub with that, and then they were probably like, well, we'll reboot it with Disney Plus, and we can do whatever we want. And then they're like, well, no, people want to continue with what they loved on the Netflix show. So then they're like, okay, well, that limits some of the characters that we can use because they killed some with the intent of maybe having a direction that was very definitive. And now we got to kind of recycle some things.
I will say the last episode made me like Kirsten a lot more, or the second to last episode. Episode 8.
I was going to say, I think, and you disagreed with me on this just to the degree that like you saw it earlier, but like the last 2 episodes, I thought that they found a better purpose for that character.
Yeah.
They literally had no purpose for her to the point that they wrote her out of the show for a few episodes where she just didn't show up, or she was like a silhouette for one episode to show how frustrated she was that Matt wasn't around. And like, I felt like they finally, like, I'm actually like, okay, she has some worth in this show now. Like if she, if she has a bigger role in season 2, I can get down with that if she goes in the right direction. If, you would have told me that in the first episode, I'd been like, oh, get rid of this character instantly because she's just like a cheap knockoff of anything we've seen so far. So yeah, I agree with that as well.
Do you think that they're going to bring back in any of the other characters from the Netflix series? So like any of the Defenders?
There's been rumors of that, and I would not be opposed to it. I think the funny thing to me is, out of all of the Defenders, I would want to see Jessica Jones come back because I love her so much. And if anybody hasn't watched Jessica Jones on the Netflix show, it's on Disney Plus now, just like Daredevil. Jessica Jones season 1 is just as good as any season of Daredevil. Like, it's so good.
Great.
And she's great, and she's my favorite.
As David Tennant. Her
and Matt Murdock in Defenders are the best part of that show. So I'd love to see her, but honestly, even sorry, our cat's freaking out.
Parkour.
Even over Jessica Jones, I don't honestly, if anyone said we can't bring back any of the Defenders, but we can bring back one character for you, even over Ben Urich, even over Wesley, Claire. If they brought back Claire, I would be like, if she just showed up next season when all hope is lost and she's there to help like do what she can, that would like bring the core heart and soul of the entire show back. Like she was the strongest part for me. So if they brought her back, like, then I'd really,
and like such a strong female character. Like, I'm sorry, we brought back mousy Karen Page, that every single thing she says, she can't say anything without her voice quivering.
Christopher Jackson said Iron Fist recast, which is funny because they interviewed the guy who did Iron Fist and he's like, give me another shot. Iron Fist is a tough character to crack because he's kind of a lower list character, and they didn't really give him much at all. And so I don't know if it's the actor or if it's just they need to bring someone new in, but
he was great in Game of Thrones, but he was really rough in Defenders. I didn't watch Iron Fist, the standalone.
See, and you know what's crazy is when Defenders came out, I had seen Defenders, but not Iron Fist. And they said, man, he was so much better in Defenders than he was in me, because he was my least favorite character in Defenders. So yeah, but so your favorite episode was episode 7. I would say mine's between episode 7 and 8, with runners up being episode 6. And episode 4 is great with the return of Punisher. I also really liked episode 2. That was the episode that kind of redeemed the show for me, because I was along with you where I thought episode 1 was weak and disappointing and it was not the hype I was looking for. So to have episode 2 come in and kind of bring me back a little bit, that I give it credit for that. Yeah. So I think that's all. I think we covered everything we feel about it.
Also, just as far as like predictions for the future, this went a completely different direction. And I know they're only halfway through this kind of like you said, it like the season is almost like a mid-season
Mid-season finale.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I don't really have too many predictions. Do you have any predictions you want to leave us with for the second half, or are you holding your tongue for now?
I'm going to leave out the spoilers that I've seen, which what I mean by spoilers is
that's
just
right.
set images. So I know kind of where some of it is going and I kind of don't. So this show is notorious, along with the other seasons, is notorious for taking iconic, whether you like them or not, iconic arcs in the Daredevil comic book world and kind of flipping them and taking elements and changing them and taking other elements and using them. What I do think is going to happen is I think they're going to introduce a few more characters from the Netflix show. I think Foggy's going to return. I will be the first to tell you if I'm wrong, but I still feel confident that I think we're going to see Foggy again. Not just in a flashback.
I still think Heather's going to die, and I still think it'll be Fisk's fault.
I do. I think Heather's going to die. I think that we are going to see some more iconic moments between Daredevil and Bullseye because they're very iconic characters together. We may get some fun stuff with them. I think we're going to see a more, we've had some comic book accurate versions of Punisher with John Bernthal, especially in this show. I think this is the closest he's gotten to being like comic book Punisher. However, I do think we're going to see him go through a change, and not like a change where he's not going to be Punisher anymore, but I think he's going to go through something where he's a little less
lone wolf.
Yeah. I think he's going to become more of a Marvel character as opposed to like a real life, what we've seen since season 2 of Daredevil. However that may turn out.
Kind of need an army of vigilantes. I hope that you're not right, Deb. And here's why. I don't like it when we were talking about the CW shows earlier. Every single time a CW show started to invite a team, right? Like a team of vigilantes, I can't do this alone, I need help team. They did it in Arrow, they did it in The Flash, they did it in the Batman, kind of. I mean, that show is pretty short, but...
You mean Gotham?
I think, well, no, they didn't really do it in Gotham.
What show are you talking about?
I'm talking about all the shows.
Oh, okay.
Where anytime they invited, like, they started to build a big team and they fought together as a big team, it always I lost interest in it. So I'm hoping that's not the route that they choose.
I agree with you in the sense that I think what you're talking about is just like in the Batman comics, you have like Batman is really good when you have more of that horror element of like detective on his own, Batman and noir. The more they introduce more characters in the Bat family, you can have a Robin eventually and make it work. You can have a Nightwing eventually and make it work. You can have a Batgirl and make it work. Once you start getting further and further and start adding another and another and another, and they sit there and instead of Batman perching on a gargoyle on some random Gotham building and he's perching and there's like 30 other Bat family members behind him, that looks weird and it defeats the purpose. So I get what you mean by that, and I didn't like that in Flash and I didn't like that in Arrow. I think the way they could make that work is if this is just a one-off kind of crossover thing. So I think where they're going is similar to Devil's Reign, where I think they want to have something where Mayor Fisk is kind of in control. He's getting rid of vigilantes and the vigilantes have no choice but to team up to kind of fight back because they're going to die if they don't. And then once they resolve this matter, they all kind of go back to being an individual character. And that's kind of what I was hinting at when I'm like, I hope that they don't just have like an ending for this and then they don't continue the story. I hope that after this arc, they try something else with Daredevil and they have him do another thing on his own. Because there's so many more stories you can tell of just him. So I don't know. It depends on how they approach it. And I don't know how they're going to, but there are ways they could do it where I'll be okay with it. And there are ways they can do it that I'll be like, ugh, like you kind of sold out. So we'll see. We have some time to kind of speculate and discuss. Yeah. I know one thing's for sure. They can't bring Spider-Man in just due to his licensing issues. And that's very disappointing.
That's too bad.
And that would have been great. I would have always loved to see, like I said, Chris Evans show up at some point or somebody like that. Never say never on that stuff, but it just doesn't seem probable. You know, we have these new Avengers movies coming out, such as Avengers Doomsday, where they just had a huge cast of like the X-Men and all these people. You could have Matt show up in that, and I think that would be great. But I hope that something like that can also be an opportunity for them. But other than that, we just kind of have to wait and see. Overall, I'm happy with the season. I'm glad that we, you know, I'm in the end, I'm happy with it. At first I was concerned and I was like, oh, they ruined it maybe. And
Me
then
too.
it kind of convinced me in the other direction. And now we're at a point where I'm like, I just need to see more. But like, I would much rather be in a place where I'm like, I need to see more than a place of like, I don't want to see any more of this. They ruined it. Like, so that's great. And I'm excited for the next part of the season or the next season, because I think I'm really excited to see where one focused group of writers and directors can do what they want to do. And we don't see this Frankenstein. But for what it was, I'm really glad that they were able to kind of get it together and figure something out that made me happy to see it. Agreed.
So what's on the docket for now that this is over? What's your next podcast episode?
Yeah, so I kind of posted something on Facebook about how we've been doing a lot of superhero stuff. And, you know, we're going to continue to do a lot of superhero stuff. There's a big movie coming out in July that is really exciting to me. It's my favorite superhero, Superman. Like I'm going to be going crazy over that movie. We're going to talk about every Superman movie up to that point. Probably we're going to have all kinds of discussions. We're going to have some exclusive like live commentaries while we watch the movies. I'm hoping we can get all that stuff together and do that before the movie comes out. We're going to talk about that movie. However, I have more interest than just superheroes. And I'm really excited to get back into some, not just live stuff, some just podcast stuff. So we have some more interviews coming out here shortly. We're going to bring back Justin, the Real Manos. He was a lot of fun to talk to. We'll talk about Daredevil and stuff, but we also have some other people that we're going to talk about horror movies, which is really exciting. I have an episode coming up here soon that I'm already kind of plotting out that we can discuss Quentin Tarantino. I'm really excited to discuss his movies and kind of my favorites and least favorites. And I'm excited to talk to everyone else because everyone has their favorite Tarantino movie. And I think you'd be surprised with my favorite movie of his. And so I'm excited to discuss that. We have a lot of movies I have a lot of movies I want to talk about, and we have other guests as well. So stay tuned. I know this has been kind of a long kind of branch of kind of a specific thing. And if you enjoyed it, I hope you did, because I had a lot of fun talking about each episode after we watched it, because Daredevil is so great to me. But I'm also really excited to jump into some other stuff outside of the superhero realm. And that'll be coming very, very shortly. So stay tuned for that. Anything else, Tricia?
No.
Probably a little less Tricia.
Yeah, probably a lot less Tricia.
You'll get Tricia every single episode with the intro.
Yep.
Christopher Lee Jackson says, "Crypto gonna steal the show." Oh, I hope so.
Oh my gosh, so cute. So cute.
It'll be exciting. And there's always some news too. I mean, every day I feel like it's crazy to me that, like, 10 years ago, I was like, gosh, I can't believe that we're getting an Avengers movie. More than 10 years ago, we're getting an Avengers movie. We're getting all these characters that, like, I never would have imagined being on, like, in a movie, and like people like it and it makes $1 billion. And I can't even more so imagine. And it's hard for me to picture, like, we are in 2025. The Marvel universe has been going on for almost like 2 decades at this point.
Wow.
And we're still, like, excited for new stuff. Like, we're still like, oh my God, there's a new Superman movie. There's a new Avengers movie. There's a new Spider-Man movie. Like, that's crazy to me that we've gone this far and we've seen so many things and people are so hyped for, like, the next thing. So, there's always news and there's always stuff to talk about there too. So we'll talk about that as well. But beyond that, I hope you guys...
Not tonight.
Not like,
tonight.
I need to go to bed.
Because it's 11:50 and this princess is turning into a pumpkin soon.
Exactly. I'll be talking to you guys about characters into the early morning. We'll do some 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon soon. Ooh, that's a good call. We'll do that for sure. I bet I could connect me to Kevin Bacon in some way, in some degrees of Kevin Bacon. In the 80s, only super nerds wanted to watch. Exactly. Good night, Blake. Good to see you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed Daredevil. If you haven't watched the series, I don't know why you guys are listening, but if you haven't watched the series, watch the old series from Netflix, watch Jessica Jones. That stuff's all great. And we will see you guys in the near future with some new podcast stuff. Make sure to follow